The wind howled through the mountains like a living thing, cutting through John's thin coat and chilling him to the bone. Snow swirled around him, hiding the trail he had followed for days. Every step was a struggle. His boots were wet, his fingers numb, and his lips cracked from the cold. Hunger clawed at his stomach, but it was the cold that made him shiver uncontrollably. He had been traveling alone, and now the world seemed empty and merciless. John sank behind a rock, pressing his back against it to shield himself from the wind. He had no fire, no food, and no shelter except for the snow that seemed endless. His mind wandered to thoughts of home, to the warmth of a bed and the smell of coffee in the morning. Those things seemed like distant dreams, impossible and fragile. He wrapped his arms around his knees and closed his eyes, trying to survive the night. Then, through the haze of snow, he saw movement. At first he thought it was a trick of the wind, a shadow cast by the moon on the snow, but it was a figure walking steadily toward him. She wore furs thick and dark, and her movements were calm, deliberate, and fearless. Her dark hair framed a face that was both strong and gentle. Her eyes locked onto his, and in them, he saw something he had not felt in days. Recognition, understanding, and perhaps even kindness. She approached him slowly. "You'll freeze out here," she said softly, her voice carrying over the wind like a warm whisper. John hesitated, unsure whether to trust this stranger. He had learned caution in a harsh world, and strangers could be dangerous. But there was something in her presence, something that spoke of certainty and experience, that made him take a step forward. I can't go much farther," he admitted, his voice shaking. The cold made it hard to speak, but the exhaustion in his body made honesty inevitable. She nodded as if she understood every word without needing an explanation. She led him through the snow toward a small cabin, half hidden behind a grove of pine trees. The structure was simple, built of rough wood, but it promised shelter and safety. John followed, every step heavy and painful, feeling the weight of fatigue in his legs. When they reached the cabin, she opened the door, revealing a small fire that crackled warmly inside. The smell of wood smoke and dry pine was comforting, like a memory from another life. "Come in," she said. "You need warmth." Inside, the cabin was sparse. A bed was pushed into one corner, blankets folded neatly, and furs stacked on a bench. John's teeth chattered as he stepped closer to the fire. She gestured toward the bed. "You can share it." "Just for warmth," she said. There was no flirtation, no misunderstanding, only practical kindness. John hesitated again. It felt strange, awkward, and intimate, sharing a bed with a stranger. But the cold had stolen his strength, his judgment, and his pride. Finally, he nodded. He carefully removed his wet coat and climbed under the blankets beside her, careful to leave space between them. The heat from her body was immediate and intense, filling him with a warmth he hadn't felt in days. His hands unclenched, his shoulders relaxed, and for the first time in what felt like forever, he exhaled fully, letting his body release some of the tension. The woman did not speak immediately. She lay still, letting him adjust to the warmth, letting him feel safe. Her presence was steady and calm, a quiet reassurance in a world that had become cruel and unpredictable. John wanted to speak, to ask who she was, where she came from, and why she had chosen to help him, but the words refused to come. Instead, he just watched her face in the dim firelight, noting the lines that told stories of hard work, struggle, and survival. Finally, she broke the silence. "You are far from home," she said. Her voice was soft, almost melodic, but it carried authority. "The world is harsh out here. Only those who are strong, careful, and wise can survive." John nodded, unsure how to respond. He felt exposed, not just physically, but emotionally. This woman had not judged him. She had not asked for anything. She had only offered warmth and protection. The realization struck him deeply. He had almost forgotten that kindness existed in the world. For hours they lay side by side, listening to the wind outside. Every gust of snow felt less terrifying, every creak of the cabin less ominous. In that shared silence, John realized that warmth was more than fire. It was trust, it was connection, and it was courage. He had met a stranger who risked her own safety to save someone she did not know, and that simple act of humanity left him shaken in ways he could not yet understand. When he finally drifted into a restless sleep, it was with the faint hope that maybe the world was not entirely cruel. Somewhere in the heart of the snow and cold, there were people like her. People who carried courage, compassion, and strength in equal measure. and for the first time in a long time, John felt that maybe he could survive the night. Morning came slowly. The wind had softened to a gentle hiss and sunlight filtered weakly through the frosted windows of the cabin. John stirred under the blankets, still warm from the night beside her. He watched her sleep for a moment. Her breathing was steady, calm, and somehow reassuring. She was so quiet, so strong. Yet there was a softness to her presence that made the cabin feel safe. He had spent his life trusting few people, but something about her made him want to believe again. There was no rush, no demand, no fear, only a quiet strength that radiated from her like the warmth of the fire they had shared. For the first time in days, John felt a strange sense of peace. He realized how fragile he had been before, lost in the cold, lost in the world, and lost in himself. When she finally awoke, she looked at him with calm, piercing eyes. "You did not leave the fire," she said quietly. "Good, many make mistakes out here." There was no judgment, only a factual statement. John smiled faintly, feeling almost embarrassed at his exhaustion, his vulnerability. Thank you," he murmured, "for last night, for letting me—" He trailed off, unsure how to put his feelings into words. Sharing warmth, sharing trust, sharing life-saving kindness. These were things he had never experienced in such raw honesty. She did not answer immediately. Instead, she moved around the cabin with quiet purpose, tending to the small fire, arranging blankets, and placing water in a bowl near him. Every action was careful, deliberate, and filled with intent. He watched her, realizing that survival was not only about strength, it was about attention, skill, and care. She had lived through hardships he could barely imagine, and yet she moved with grace, never wasting effort, never panicking. "Where are you from?" he asked finally, unable to hold back his curiosity. She paused, her hands frozen over the wood she was stacking. Her eyes met his, and he noticed something deeper there, a history, a pain, and a pride that was all her own. "I am Apache," she said. Her voice was soft but carried authority, like the wind that shaped the mountains. "My people taught me to survive in the cold, to respect the land, and to trust only when it is necessary." John listened, fascinated. He had read about the Apache in books, studied their history, but nothing could prepare him for the reality of meeting someone who carried that history in her bones. She had survived, adapted, and thrived where most would have perished, and yet she had chosen to help him, a stranger. The thought left him both humbled and shaken. Hours passed, and they spoke little, but the silence was not uncomfortable. It was a quiet trust that grew naturally, like a fire catching in dry wood. She occasionally glanced at him, and he felt a subtle reassurance in her gaze. He was no longer just a traveler lost in the cold. He was someone she had chosen to protect, and that choice mattered. He noticed scars on her hands, long, thin lines that hinted at old battles or accidents, each one a story he would never fully know. Her arms bore the same marks, reminders that life had not been easy, that survival had been hard-earned. And yet she smiled occasionally, a small, gentle curve of her lips that hinted at humor, resilience, and hope. "You are quiet," she said suddenly, breaking the silence. "Not everyone survives silence. I have learned to listen," he admitted. "Sometimes people speak too much and nothing is said." You do not waste words," she nodded. "Words have power. Words can harm. But silence can save." John felt a deep respect for her. He realized that survival was more than strength or skill. It was understanding the world and respecting it. She had the wisdom of generations, but she also had something he had almost forgotten, the humanity to care for another, even when it cost her something. He shivered slightly, the fire unable to chase away all the cold still lingering in his bones. She noticed immediately, moving closer, not too close, but just enough to share warmth. He felt a strange comfort in her presence. It was not fear nor desire, but a quiet acknowledgement that humans could be powerful in ways beyond fighting or hunting. They could be protectors, nurturers, and guardians. As the sun climbed higher, John realized he had learned something in the cabin that was more valuable than any map, weapon, or knowledge he had ever acquired. He had learned that trust could be given and received in small, deliberate ways. He had learned that courage could take many forms, sometimes quiet, sometimes fierce. And he had learned that humanity was not about domination, but about choosing to care, even when the world seemed merciless. When she finally stood to prepare food, John felt a mix of gratitude and awe. He had survived the cold, yes, but more importantly, He had survived the fear of being alone, the fear of being forge, Aten, and the fear that human kindness was rare. In that small cabin, in the presence of a stranger who had become his savior, John understood that sometimes the greatest strength was simply to be human. He watched her, noting the quiet confidence in her movements, the dignity in her presence, and the warmth in her eyes. He knew that their lives had intersected for a reason, and that the lessons of the night, the trust, the courage, and the quiet humanity, would stay with him forever. The wind outside had softened into a gentle whisper, and the cabin smelled of smoke and pine. John sat on the edge of the bed staring at the fire, watching the flames dance as though alive. The warmth of the room, the quiet presence of the woman beside him, and the fading pain of the cold made him feel almost human again. Yet he could sense there was more to her story, something deep, powerful, and unspoken that she carried in her silence. Finally she spoke, her voice calm and steady like the voice of someone used to commanding respect without raising it. "I am Apache," she said. "My people have lived on this land for centuries. We learned to survive the heat of summer, the cold of winter, and the cruelty of those who sought to take what was ours." John listened, captivated. He had read about the Apache, their courage and their struggles, but hearing it from someone who had lived that life was different, real, vivid, and painful. He imagined the mountains, the rivers, and the endless deserts she must have known. He imagined the dangers that had shaped her, the enemies she had faced, and the strength it had taken to survive. "They tried to push us from our land," she continued, her eyes distant, looking at a memory only she could see. "They tried to break us, to make us vanish, but we survived. We endured. My people taught me to honor the earth, to respect life, and to protect those who cannot protect themselves." Her words were not boastful. They were matter of fact, like someone stating what was necessary for survival. John felt a shiver that was not from the cold. He realized that the courage she carried was unlike anything he had known. She had faced death and hardship countless times, yet she still moved through the world with calm determination and quiet strength. And yet, despite all she had endured, she had chosen to help him, a stranger. "You saved me," John said softly, almost afraid to speak. "Why?" "You didn't know me. You didn't owe me anything." She looked at him, her gaze steady. "I chose to help," she said. Survival is not only for oneself. True strength is to know when to protect, when to give, and when to act. You were in danger. I saw it. I chose to act. John's chest tightened. He felt a mix of gratitude, awe, and shame. He had thought he was strong, that he could survive on his own, but she had reminded him how fragile human life could be, and she had shown him that humanity, real, unyielding humanity, was more than survival. It was courage, compassion, and the ability to protect even when no one was watching. She paused, looking at her hands, scarred from years of labor and battle. "I have seen friends die," she said quietly. "I have seen families torn apart. I have seen children left alone in the cold. That is why I do not waste life. That is why I help those who are in need, even strangers. To survive is not enough. To live with honor is everything." John felt tears prick his eyes. The stories she told were not just tales, they were lessons. They carried wisdom, sorrow, and a fierce pride that demanded respect. He realized how small his struggles had been, how fragile his courage seemed compared to the life she had lived. Yet she had shared warmth with him without hesitation, without judgment, and without expectation. "Do you trust me?" he asked, unsure how to phrase the question. Her eyes softened, just slightly, a flicker of something human and tender appearing in the depth of her gaze. "I trust actions, not words," she said. "And your actions show that you respect life even when it is fragile. That is enough for now." John sat quietly, feeling the weight of her words settle in his heart. He realized that trust was more than a spoken promise. It was a choice, a recognition of strength, courage, and humanity. He understood that she had tested him, not with words or threats, but with the simple act of observing who he was in the cold, in danger, and in silence. Hours passed, and the fire dwindled to glowing embers. John felt a strange sense of calm. The woman had shared her story, and with it she had shared a part of herself, a part of her culture, and a part of her heart. He felt honored, humbled, and inspired. She had survived horrors he could barely imagine, and yet she remained human, kind, and capable of compassion. As he lay back staring at the ceiling of the cabin, John felt a warmth that went beyond the fire. It was the warmth of trust, courage, and humanity. He realized that the world was larger than his fears, more beautiful than his loneliness, and filled with people capable of inspiring awe through simple acts of kindness and strength. For the first time in days, he felt hope. Not a fragile hope, but a steady, unshakable belief that people could survive, could endure, and could rise above cruelty and cold. And he knew, deep in his bones, that this encounter, this quiet sharing of trust and strength, would stay with him forever. She had taught him a lesson he would never forget. Survival was not only about strength, speed, or cunning. It was about courage, humanity, and the quiet choice to care for another when it mattered most. The calm of the cabin did not last. As night fell, the wind picked up again, whispering through the trees and rattling the walls of the small wooden shelter. John had begun to relax, lulled by the fire and the quiet presence of the Apache woman beside him. But then, a faint noise outside made him stiffen. A crunch in the snow. A shadow moving in the trees. He sat up slowly, eyes wide, heart pounding. "Did you hear that?" he whispered. She did not startle. Instead, she reached out and placed a steadying hand over his. "Wait," she said softly. Her voice was calm, controlled, and filled with authority. John felt his own panic begin to fade, replaced by awe. She had faced danger before. He could sense it in the quiet way she moved. Through the frosted window he saw them, figures approaching the cabin, men armed, their intentions unknown. Fear gripped him. He wanted to flee, but he knew there was no escape in the snow. He glanced at her. She stood tall and alert, her eyes scanning the forest as though she could see through the trees. "Stay here," she whispered. "Do not move." John's mind raced. He had never been so close to real danger. He thought of running, of hiding, but her calmness held him in place. He watched as she stepped outside, moving silently in the snow, her body blending with the shadows. Her presence was commanding, almost otherworldly. She carried no weapon in her hands, yet there was an unmistakable authority in every motion. The men approached, their voices rough, their footsteps loud in the otherwise silent night. John held his breath, unable to look away. The Apache woman raised her voice once, a sharp, commanding sound in a language John did not understand. The men froze. Then slowly they retreated, looking over their shoulders with fear and hesitation. John exhaled slowly, the tension in his body easing as she returned to the cabin. She did not smile, did not boast. She simply moved back to the fire, her presence still calm, still steady. John felt his knees weaken. He had witnessed courage beyond anything he could imagine. She had faced danger alone, and without hesitation, she had protected him. "Who were they?" he asked, voice trembling. "Hunters," she said quietly. "Some are curious, some are cruel. Tonight they were both. They did not expect someone to stand their ground." John shook his head, unable to find words. The realization hit him with full force. She was a warrior in every sense, not just strong in body, but strong in mind and spirit. He had shared warmth and trust with a woman who had survived battles he could barely imagine. And now, he had seen that same courage protect life without question. The fire crackled, and John looked at her, studying her face. There was no fear in her eyes, only focus and control. He wondered how many nights she had survived like this, alone facing dangers he could never imagine. He realized that the kindness she had shown him the previous night had not come from weakness. It had come from strength, the kind of strength that could protect others without hesitation, the kind of courage that left no room for doubt. Hours passed. The men did not return, and the forest slowly returned to silence. John lay back down on the bed, but he did not feel the same warmth as before. His mind was racing, his heart still pounding with awe. He understood now what it meant to survive in the harsh world she had lived in. Strength alone was not enough. Wisdom, courage, and the ability to act without fear were what truly mattered. "You saved me," he said quietly. She looked at him, her gaze steady. "I did what I had to do," she said simply. Survival is not always for oneself. Sometimes protecting another is the greatest test of strength. John felt tears prick his eyes. The night had been terrifying, but it had also been a lesson. He had seen courage, skill, and humanity in a way that left him humbled. The woman, who had shared warmth with him, had also shared something more profound. The knowledge that human beings were capable of greatness beyond imagination, that they could inspire awe through simple acts of bravery and protection. He understood now why she had chosen to help him. It was not pity, not kindness for kindness's sake. It was strength, honor, and the recognition of life's fragility. She had shared warmth, she had shared trust, and she had shared courage. And in doing so, she had changed him forever. As the fire burned low, John drifted into a restless sleep, his dreams filled not with fear but with awe. He dreamed of the woman who had faced the storm, the hunters and the cold who had protected him without question, without hesitation. He dreamed of courage that could move mountains, of humanity that could survive even the harshest nights, and deep inside, he knew that he would carry the lessons of this night with him forever, the courage, the trust, and the quiet power of a human heart that could stand against fear itself. Morning broke quietly over the snow-covered forest. The wind had softened, the cold was still biting, but the sun cast a gentle golden light through the cabin window. John sat by the fire, still in awe of the night before. He had survived the cold, the hunters, and fear itself, but he knew he had also survived because of her. She had shared her courage, her warmth, and her strength with him. He watched her move around the cabin with her usual quiet grace, arranging the firewood and preparing water. Then a thought pressed on his mind, a question he had been afraid to ask. He looked at her, nervous and hesitant. Why did you let me share your bed?" She paused, her hands hovering over the wood she had stacked. For a moment her eyes softened, but there was something else there, something deeper, a secret she had kept hidden. Her voice was low, calm, but carried the weight of truth. "Because," she said slowly, "I am carrying life." John froze, not from fear, but from a sudden realization that left him speechless. Carrying life, a child. The truth hit him like ice water, leaving him stunned. She had shared warmth with him, risked danger for him, and yet she carried the strength of two lives, her own and another. The courage he had witnessed was not just hers. It was multiplied, magnified by the life growing inside her. She looked at him steady and unflinching. "I do not share my trust lightly," she said. "But I saw in you someone who could respect life, someone who would honor it, not destroy it. That is why I let you in. That is why I shared warmth and safety with you." John struggled to find words. His mind raced, his heart pounding. He had met many people, faced danger, and survived trials. But he had never encountered someone like her, someone who carried the weight of her own life in another, and yet could offer courage, protection, and kindness without hesitation. "I don't know what to say," he whispered finally. "I never expected this. I never imagined someone could be so strong." She smiled faintly, but it was a smile that carried both pride and burden. "Strength is not always shown in fighting," she said. "It is shown in surviving and protecting and choosing to care for others when the world expects you to care only for yourself. Carrying life is not weakness, it is the ultimate responsibility. And you earned the right to be here by respecting it." John felt awe, reverence, and humility all at once. The realization settled over him like the snow outside, immense, silent, and beautiful. She had saved him not because she owed him anything, but because she was strong enough, courageous enough, and human enough to protect life wherever she found it. He noticed her scars again, the marks on her hands and arms, and he understood that every line told a story of endurance, of pain survived, of battles won and lost. And now he realized that beneath that quiet, calm exterior was a secret power, a life-growing strength that made her nearly untouchable, yet profoundly human. John sat back, trying to process it all. The fear of the previous night seemed small now, dwarfed by the realization of what she carried. He had thought he understood courage, but he had been wrong. Courage was not only facing enemies or surviving cold, it was living every day, carrying burdens unseen, and still choosing to act with honor, kindness, and wisdom. "You trust me so easily," he said, voice trembling. "Even with this, even knowing." "I do not trust easily," she said quietly, almost to herself. "But I choose to act when I see what is right. Life is fragile. I honor it. That is my secret. That is my strength." For a long moment, neither spoke. The fire crackled, shadows danced across the cabin walls, and John felt a profound sense of respect and awe. He understood now that humanity, even in its quietest forms, could inspire greatness. A single person acting with courage, trust, and compassion could change the course of survival, could leave a mark on the world without ever raising a weapon. Finally, he reached out, careful and hesitant, as though touching her might break the fragile truth he had discovered. I will never forget this," he said. "Not the warmth, not the trust, not the courage. I will carry it with me forever." She nodded slightly, a quiet acknowledgement that he had understood. "Then you are human," she said simply. "Not just strong, not just clever, but human enough to see the value of life, to honor it. That is what matters most." John felt tears prick his eyes. He had come to the cabin seeking warmth, but he had found something far greater. He had found trust, courage, humanity, and the knowledge that people, humans, could achieve greatness in the quietest, most profound ways. As the sun climbed higher, he realized that he had been changed forever. She had shared her secret, her life, and her strength, and in doing so she had left him frozen, not from cold, but from awe. For John, the Apache woman was no longer a stranger. She was a lesson in survival, courage, and humanity. She was proof that even in the harshest conditions, humans could rise above fear, act with honor, and inspire hope in those who needed it most. And deep in the quiet warmth of the cabin, John understood the truth he would carry for the rest of his life. Sometimes, the greatest warriors were not those with weapons, but those who carried life, protected it, and chose to act with courage and honor, always. The snow outside sparkled in the early morning light, pure and untouched, stretching endlessly into the horizon. The cabin felt warmer now, not just from the fire, but from the quiet understanding that had settled between John and the Apache woman. He sat on the bed, reflecting on the night, on the danger, and on the revelation of her secret. She had shared warmth with him, protected him, and revealed the life she carried, and in doing so she had left him transformed. She moved around the cabin, gathering her belongings with calm efficiency. Her presence was steady, every action deliberate, yet she carried no arrogance, only quiet dignity. John watched her, trying to commit every detail to memory. The way she moved, the strength in her arms, the gentleness in her eyes. She was a living testament to courage and humanity, a reminder that strength was not measured by violence, but by the choices one made in the face of adversity. He realized that the warmth he had shared with her was more than physical. It had been a connection of trust, of mutual respect, of silent understanding. He had come to her seeking survival, but he had found inspiration, guidance, and a lesson that he would carry for the rest of his life. "Are you leaving soon?" he asked quietly, unsure if he wanted the moment to end. She looked at him, her gaze softening, but still full of quiet authority. "Yes," she said. "The snow will not last forever, and the world continues. Life waits for no one but you. Remember what I taught you. Respect life. Protect those who cannot protect themselves. Act with courage even when the world seems cruel." John nodded. Words failed him. How could he express what he felt? Gratitude, awe, reverence? She had saved him, guided him, and left him in awe of human strength. Yet he knew that simple words would never be enough. The lessons she had shared were too profound, too powerful, and too human. He stood, gathering his own gear, feeling the weight of the journey ahead. The snow stretched beyond the cabin, cold and daunting, but he felt different now. He carried warmth, not only from the fire, but from the understanding that humans could be more than survivors. They could be heroes in their quietest, most profound ways. "Thank you," he said finally, his voice trembling slightly. For everything. For the warmth, the trust, the courage. She nodded once faintly, acknowledging the words. Then you have learned, she said simply. Not everyone is strong. Not everyone survives. But those who do, they can inspire others. Remember that. As John stepped outside, the sunlight blinded him for a moment. He breathed in the cold, crisp air, feeling it fill his lungs and wake every sense. The world was harsh, the forest vast, and danger always present. Yet he felt ready. He had been tested in ways he had never imagined, and he had survived. Not alone, but because of the humanity he had witnessed. He looked back at the cabin, and at her standing in the doorway. The wind caught her furs, making them billow slightly, and for a moment she seemed like a figure from a legend, a warrior, a protector, a human being whose courage shone brighter than any fire. John felt a profound respect, almost reverence for her. She had chosen to act with honor, compassion, and courage, and in doing so, she had changed him forever. Walking through the snow, he thought of the night, of the hunters, of the cold, and of the secret she had shared. He thought of her life, the life she carried, and the strength it took to survive. And he realized that humanity, in its truest form, was not about fear, selfishness, or cruelty. It was about courage, trust, and the willingness to protect what mattered most. Each step he took felt lighter, yet full of purpose. He carried the lessons she had taught him, the value of life, the strength of trust, and the courage to act even when the world seemed merciless. The snow crunched beneath his boots, but he